I heard heavy movement around the camp. And it was just like, it wasn't constant. It was just every so often it sounded something big was moving up by where my Jeep was parked. And it would go quiet. And I'm just like, am I hearing things? And I lay down and I was just starting to fall asleep again. And something grabbed the tent, those tarps, and pulled on those tarps. And I just sat straight up and screamed.
Hi there, you're listening to the Bigfoot Society podcast, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Every week I talk to individuals who have experienced Sasquatch in some way or another, so you won't want to miss an episode. Make sure you're subscribed on the platform that you're listening to, and share this episode with a friend. It does not cost a thing, and it helps the show continue to grow. If you'd like to hear Bigfoot Society episodes early and ad-free, you can do so by becoming a Patreon supporter or a YouTube channel member. Links to those are in the show notes. In Bigfoot Society, I've taken far too much of your time so far, so let's get on with the show. This time we've got Mr. Chris Spencer with me from the Olympic Project. How's it going, Chris?
Good. How are you, Jeremiah?
Doing well, man. I've been wanting to talk to you for quite a long time, so I'm pumped to have you on. In case we've got people that are not familiar with Chris, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about your bio before we get into it here. Chris Spencer has been investigating and researching the subject of Sasquatch since 2015. A Washington State native, Chris has had an interest in the subject his whole life. After an anthropology class with Dr. Grover Krantz, which, oh my goodness, in the spring of 1992, he's always approached the subject from a science-based perspective. Chris followed the subject loosely until he and his son had a disturbing experience in 2013. At that point, he began investigating and actively searching for evidence of the target subjects being Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. In 2015, he began audio recording in areas of interest and is now a member of the Olympic Project, which hopefully all listeners to this know what the Olympic Project is. I'll try to remember to put some links so you can watch that great STM documentary, of course. Chris, you're dropping some crazy stuff in that bio. Is there anything else that the audience would want to know, or should that be good, do you think?
Pretty good. Like everybody else that's in the subject, found my interest starting with the In Search of film that came out in the 70s. I must have been about 6 or 7. But shortly after watching that, and I remember my dad watching that film and saying, oh, that's a guy in a suit and this and that. And it wasn't long after that, we had a cabin in Packwood, Washington.
Okay.
And it was, I want to say it was late spring. Like I said, I was like 6 or 7, but me and my dad and my little sister went up to cut some wood for the cabin. Mm-hmm. And there was a fresh clear cut that you could see down into the valley and see Packwood, the town. And Dad wanted to take some pictures, and he had one of them little instant camera things, and he was taking pictures. And I'd found these tracks along the side of the road in the mud, and it was mud and slushy snow. And they were bare footprint tracks. I don't remember the details to them, but they're really big. And I remember telling my dad, hey, Dad, look at this, Bigfoot. And what I do remember specifically is my dad's reaction. He came over, I'm bent down over the track, and he's looking at the track, and his eyes just about bulged out of his head. And he said, get in the truck, we're leaving.
Really?
And that was it. That was like, I don't know. I don't remember the details of the track. I just remember they were big bare footprints. My dad on the way home, I remember him saying it was probably hunters. And I remember actually then before we got in the truck, he said it's probably hunters. I remember saying, well, if it's a hunter, he doesn't have shoes on, Dad. Yeah, it definitely bothered him because he always said Bigfoot was a joke. Basically, he does it now, which is cool. He's 80 now. He follows what I do. He's really interested in what I'm doing now. He's at that age where memories just pop into his head. When I first started this, one of the first suspect things I ever recorded were some whistles. And I was playing them for my dad. This is back in like 2016 or 7. No, actually 2017. And out of nowhere, he just goes, "Oh, the Whistling Wolverine." I'm like, "Whistling Wolverine? What are you talking about, Dad?" He goes, "It's the Whistling Wolverine." And I'm like, I go, "Dad, what are you talking about?" Evidently, he was once again up at Packwood. He had hiked into Packwood Lake and camped out for a night by himself. And on his way out, he heard whistles. And when he didn't think anything of it. When he got back to Packwood, he went into the Blue Spruce Tavern, which is still there today, and he asked the locals about it, and they all told him, "Oh, it's the Whistling Wolverine," and that's all he remembered of it. And I go, "Oh, Dad, why haven't you told me this story before?" Because he knows what I do.
What was it like to be a student of Dr. Grover Krantz in that anthropology class?
Honestly, I was 18, 19 at the time. And my mind was not on Bigfoot in those days at all. But I loved history and anthropology. That my major was history, but I took just as many anthropology classes as I did history classes. And I didn't think much of it. He was just an older, kind of scary professor. Yeah, I'm old school. I was scared of a lot of my teachers, and it wasn't that I was scared of him. It was just I had a certain respect for him, and it was Dr. Krantz and this and that. And it was just a regular class until one day, and I found out this later, he devoted one lecture every semester to the topic of Sasquatch.
Definitely.
And this is one of the, now looking back, man, I wish I had a tape recorder with me for that lecture. I have my notes somewhere in a box out in my garage. I need to dig out. I walked into class, and here on his counter were these cast tracks, and of course the recreation of the Gigantopithecus skull that he actually came up with from the jaws.
Yeah.
He took measurements and built that skull that you see all the time now. And that was sitting on the counter, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? But like I said, I wish I had a tape recorder, because that's a long time ago. I don't remember all the details, but he went through the Patterson Gimlin film, and he had, I think, a third generation copy. And when he was done with that film, like I said before, up until that point, my dad had always said it was a guy in a suit, and pretty much that's what I thought too. When I left that lecture, I believe that was a real animal.
Wow.
He explained why it couldn't be a person, and he had the film, and the film that he showed in the class was way better quality than what I'd seen on TV.
Oh yeah.
Point.
Oh yeah.
And so after that class, I called my mom and I told her about it, and it just happened. That was the same year that he released Big Footprints, his book. It had just come out. But my mom actually picked me up a copy of the book, and I was home on one of the weekends, because I live in Western Washington, so every so often I'd drive home for a weekend or something. But she got me a copy of that book, and I actually took it to his lab, and I got him to sign it. And then I bought a copy of the Dermals cast. It's one of the tracks in his book that he discusses quite a bit, because it has dermal ridges on it. And it's a cast that Paul Freeman had made from the Blue Mountains. So I have a copy of that, and I think I paid $20 for it or something. But I didn't think I was a dummy. I didn't get him to sign it. I got him to sign my book.
Oh yeah.
I should have had him sign the darn cast. I didn't do that.
Man, that would be nuts.
I still have that book. I've read that book I don't know how many times.
Oh, dude.
It's probably, hands down, it's one of the best books out there. If you're just getting into this subject, you got to read Grover Krantz's Big Footprints. It's got to be. What other books do you recommend too? Just, I know that's Meldrum's a loaded book. Question. Yeah, Meldrum's When Legend Meets Science. I actually, let's see, I really enjoyed Leiterman's book that just came out, The Bluff Creek Project.
Oh yeah, I haven't read that yet. I need to.
It's not, it's not really about there's not a lot of Bigfoot stuff in it, but I enjoyed hearing his take on the process of refining the film site. I really enjoyed that. He did a good job. Yeah, honestly, a lot of the books are really repetitive to me. My top book is probably John Green's book, and Grover Krantz's Big Footprints. Those are
awesome.
My two top picks. I love Kathy Strain's book, which is basically a collection of Native American stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got that in 2015, and I met Kathy in 2015, and I got her to sign that. But she's really nice lady, very encouraging, and I have nothing but good things to say about her and her husband Bob. They're awesome people, very encouraging people. When you first meet them, just very down to earth people. I loved her book because it actually has the Native American stories from tribes in my area. And I've recorded some of the things they talk about in their stories. So it's like lends that little extra credence to the area that I'm recording in. When I whistle, specifically the Yakima tribe, the Puyallup tribe, I think the Chehalis tribe too, but I know the Yakima tribe and the Puyallup tribe talked about whistles around Mount St. Helens quite a bit. And that's one of the things I've recorded up there. So
over, let's say, all the things you've recorded, is there a recording that sticks out to you? Like maybe you could describe that. Hey, that to me is like the coolest thing I've ever recorded.
It changes every year. I get one thing every year, but there's one from 2016.
Okay.
I call it 8 Fit, and it's hands down one of my favorites.
Oh, man.
It sounds like a gorilla getting ticked off in the woods.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's wild,
but
dude.
I was talking to Shane just the other day, and I'm like, I have a lot of cool audio I need to go back through that I forget about. Obviously, the whistles. Again, some of my first catches are my favorites. I have one called Mr. Grumpy Pants I got in 2016. And it's just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's on my YouTube channel if anyone wants to go listen to everything. Both of those are on my YouTube channel.
Awesome. Are they actually titled that too?
Yeah. I did a comparison, and then Mr. Grumpy Pants is just titled Mr. Grumpy Pants.
Perfect. I will link those in the show notes. Let's talk about the experience with your son. There's something that happened in 2013. Do you mind sharing that?
So I want to say 2011, I had a knocking kind of experience while bass fishing. So it had rekindled my interest in the subject. At the time of that experience, I knew about knocking, but I didn't correlate it really with Bigfoot until I started investigating it. But basically, I want to say it was either 2010 or 2011. I used to fish. My thing before Bigfoot was competition bass fishing. So
cool.
If I wasn't at work, I was bass fishing, and it just happened I was fishing with a friend from my bass club on Rife Lake in late September. It was a gorgeous day, and we'd just been running cranks parallel to the shore, and as we're going down this one shoreline, there was something large moving in the timber, and we were on the side that's up against the Gifford Pinchot National Forest.
Okay.
So it's all thick, almost straight up and down hillside right there. It was something big, and it was breaking branches, and it wasn't all the time, but it was consistently moving with us as we fished down the shoreline for a good half hour plus. And I had noticed it, and I didn't say anything to my buddy, and we got to a creek, and we got on some fish. So we hung out around this creek, and I was drop shotting in about 20 feet of water. And I love smallmouth fishing. We were catching smallmouth. Anyways, so the thought of whatever that was just is gone. We're catching fish. We're getting doubles and this and that. And finally, the fishing slows down, and we decide, let's drop the big motor and run up the lake to closer to the mouth of the river, where the river flows into the reservoir. And as we're putting our poles away and he's lowering the big motor, pow, from the timber. And I looked at him, and he laughed. He goes, "What do you think it is, Bigfoot?" And I'm like,
"Oh no."
I just I don't know. I go, "Did you notice what was moving? There was something moving along shore." He goes, "Yeah, it's probably elk." And that was it. We went fishing. But that spurred my interest in the subject again. And I actually started looking at YouTube and reading all the junk that's out there and this and that. I did have Bigfoot in the back of my brain.
Right.
It wasn't like an obsession like it is now, but I was more aware of the subject at that point in time. So by 2013, I wasn't completely out of the loop with the subject. And I actually contacted a BFRO guy because I found the BFRO shortly after that. And I was actually in the process of making a report with him about that experience. And when we had our experience in 2013. Anyways, so my son was 13 years old.
Okay.
And I'd bought him a little Walmart 2-man tent for Christmas, and he really wanted to use it. And so his spring break started April 5th. So it was a colder year. It was very much like this year. We're having really a cold, wet spring this year. And it was a similar weather-wise year. And it was just horrid weather. And I told Jameis, I said, well, let's get on 14 and we'll head east and we'll see what the weather's like east of the mountains. We end up driving out to Skamania County campground. The weather was nicer. It was drier. It was still wasn't great weather, but it was cold and there was still snow up around 2,000 foot level. But this was April 5th. It was a Friday. We got to the campground. The campground had opened April 1st and there was no one else there. And I'm pretty sure we were the first people to camp there. We set up camp right on the river, got out and decided to do a little exploring. And the campground is, you basically have Highway 14 and then you have the Columbia River. And it's just this little sliver of timber. It's maybe 5 acres. And at that time, it was very thick with brush. There was a lot of vine maple, a lot of salmonberry, and around the campground. We went down to the river and we walked up along the river and we came to a spot where there was a trail that went back into the timber. And there was some old degraded tracks, human foot-shaped tracks in the sand. And I remember my son, Jameson, he was like, oh, look, Dad, Bigfoot. And I'm like, whatever. We walked up this trail and it hit another trail that went back to camp. As we're walking in the timber, I started noticing little clusters of piles of freshwater clams in the timber that were just open and clean. They weren't chewed on. They weren't broken. And it just, in the back of my mind, I was like, that's odd. Birds, ravens will pick those up. Jays will pick those up. But usually you find the shells at the shoreline where critters have gnawed on them, broke them, and this and that. But it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that some jays or ravens had brought some back into the timber. But it was just something in the back of my head that just was odd, because they weren't, like I said, they weren't chewed on. They were just open and clean. We got walking and we were almost to our camp, and we come around a bend, and right in the middle of the trail, there's this vine maple that's twist broke and wrapped around a big fir tree. And it's fresh twist broke up about 6 feet high. And right below it in the pine needles is an 8x9 inch track. And you can see a definite heel.
Oh, man.
And what looks like toes. It was very fresh. Both me and Jameson were like, holy crap. We were like, this is cool. And so we started really looking around. We found another track that went into thicker brush in all this leaf matter that measured 8 or 9x18. I actually ran back to my Jeep to get a tape measure so I could measure all these. And I had a flip phone at the time. I have pictures somewhere, but they're terrible. But we took pictures, and basically we're excited. We're like, oh, this is cool. We found some other odd broken branches and stuff, but that vine maple limb twist, I cut it out.
Oh, you got it right there? No way.
It's nothing like it was, because it unflexed itself. It's all dried out, but this was green and twisted all the way over. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Anyways, you still have it.
Anyways, we went back to camp, and we were all excited, and we decided to go fishing. We went and fished a couple ponds that are off the highway there, and came back, and we were roasting hot dogs, and it had started lightly raining. So I set up this little tent of his. Didn't come with a rain fly. It's a Walmart. I had 2 small tarps, and I set up 2 tarps over the top of our tent, and I tied them up with paracord. It gets dark, and Jameson went to bed about 9:30, and I fully admit, I was thinking about those tracks and that twist break we found, and it's dark out, and we're the only people. I was creeped out, but I finally went to bed maybe a half an hour after him. I fell asleep, but I woke up shortly after midnight. I heard heavy movement around the camp, and it was just like, it wasn't constant. It was just every so often it sounded something big was moving up by where my Jeep was parked.
Okay.
And it would go quiet, and I'm just like, am I hearing things? And I lay down, and I was just starting to fall asleep, and something grabbed the tent, those tarps, and pulled on those tarps.
Oh no.
And I just sat straight up and screamed the F word.
Yeah.
And screamed, what the F? And Jameson, it woke Jameson up, and Jameson was just like, what's going on? I'm like, nothing. I'm just bad dream. Go back to sleep. And yeah, he's 13. He just go to sleep like that on a dime. Right. He goes back to sleep, and I lay down, and I'm like, I'm second guessing myself. I'm like, did I really hear that? Or because I was in and out of sleep, and I was just talking myself into that didn't happen. And it, just in case, I grabbed the fob to my Jeep. I had the fob in my hand, and I had the 44 in this other hand, and I'm just I've fallen asleep again, and it happened again. And this time I hit the fob, lights and the horn go off with the Jeep.
Yep.
And I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat there. That's probably the scaredest I've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
It up to that point, that's the scaredest I've ever been camping, and it's still the scaredest I've ever been. I really did a number on myself. I was like shaking. I was so scared at a couple points.
Wow.
And I couldn't get myself to get out of the tent. I'm sitting there with my son. I got a 44 Magnum. I can't talk myself into getting out of the tent. Now, mind you, nothing touched the tent again or those tarps. Nothing came close to us again, but I did sporadically throughout the night, I would hear that heavy movement. And at one point, because we were right by the water, something was down splashing around in the water.
Really?
And, yeah. And it was actually really nerve wracking. I had the sweats, and someone told me after it happened, they're like, oh, you got zapped. I'm like, no, I didn't get zapped. I was just scared out of my mind. But somewhere around 3:30, I remember looking at my phone, and I was just like, oh, please let it get light. I want it to get light. And somewhere around that time and 4, pow, knock. Right behind, I laid there probably for another 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden I was like, this is silly. I got out of the tent, I built up a fire, and I waited for Jameson to get up. And of course, when he got up, I asked him, I said, what'd you hear last night? And I heard you cussing, and I heard the horn and the lights and everything going off on the Jeep. And then I told him what I heard, and he looked at me and goes, I don't want to stay here again, Dad. And I'm like, we're not.
Yeah,
we're leaving.
right. Yeah, totally.
That's what got me into this. So.
That's funny because it's like a parallel to what happened to you and your father, where you saw the track and your dad was like getting the Jeep or going.
It is.
But it happened with your son. That's really cool, man.
That wasn't lost upon me. So, yeah, it was. Yeah, after that, I just, I did the YouTube thing. I was watching and reading everything I could possibly find on the subject. And I started listening to podcasts, and Shane had another podcast besides Monster X going. I'd listened to him several times, and I thought, man, I really like this guy. I want to meet him sometime. And I think it was either one of his shows, one of those shows, or one of Monster X shows. I heard David Ellis talking about audio recording.
Oh, yeah.
And this is like 2014 by this time. And I'm like, you know what? That really interests me. Just taking a recorder out in the woods when no one's there and just leaving it and seeing what it picks up at night. I was intrigued by that thought. And I decided I'm going to find a place to do that at. And I actually, in 2014, I went back to that campground, and the county had gone through. The county had gone through and cleared it all out. It's wide open. The big trees are there, but all that brush, all that vine maple's gone. You could see for days in there then.
Interesting.
Because I had planned on, if it's still the way it was, I was going to set up a recorder there. Why not? And I spent a lot of time driving around the Wind River. around the southeast side of St. Helens. And it just dawned on me. I was coming home. I was going past Eagle Cliff store one evening after spending the day driving all over. And it just dawned on me, you dummy, you got to go where the animals are. And I know where the elk winter.
Makes sense.
Here, very close to where I live. And I decided I'm going to go in there and start recording there. And I sure is, you know what? I end up catching some interesting stuff. And I didn't mean to ramble. I got off topic, but
no, that's good, dude. Do you mind if we try to play one of the sound clips right now? I'm going to try to share one, specifically the ape fit one. All right, let's see if I can do it.
Hi, Jeremiah from the future there. Spoiler alert, he did not do it. We had some technical malfunctions there, but I will put in the show notes the link to the sound that we were trying to play, and also a link to another sound that I really should have played. Anyway, it's a whole deal. But thanks for your patience, guys. All right, back to the show.
That's one of the first things I put up on my...
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I've done a comparison since then that's a little bit better, but that I can tell you about that recording. What's cool about it.
Yeah.
Basically, at that point in time, I was taking a Tascam out with an external battery pack, and I could get about 3 days and 2 nights. And I put it out on a Friday, and the elk had been in there. And so I don't know if you ever record elk. They're like a herd of cattle going through the woods. They make a lot of noise.
Okay.
And so the elk were in there the first night. Somewhere in the morning, the elk actually leave. You hear them breaking branches and walking off. A storm rolls through, big storm. I actually recorded a bunch of thunder and light thunder on it. Around 6 o'clock, storm's done. And it's just that silence in the woods. Just that there's no wind. It's just utterly silent. There's a few drops of water from residual rain and just complete silence. At 10:51 p.m., that happens. And basically, if you didn't hear it, there's several percussives. There's something grunting.
Yep.
And then there's an ending percussive. You have that noise, and then it goes dead silent again. And it's silent till the batteries died in the recorder like 8 hours later. Gotcha. I've looked at the grunts, and it's not like any elk I've ever recorded before. Some people say it could be bear. The percussives are what make it for me. When I get vocals and percussives, that's when it becomes really intriguing, because that last percussive, that was done intentionally, and something with hands did it. So that's why I love that clip. I try to tell people with the audio, it's not, I'm looking at everything visually, of course. It's not just, it's a combination of things. It's what the visual signatures are, what it sounds like, the pitch and tone, but it's also the context. What was going on before the sound occurred? Okay. What happened after the sound occurred? All of that plays a part in how I come to dub something suspicious or not. Different animals will have specific signatures, and each individual animal may have a different pitch and tone, maybe run a little variance in the frequencies, but especially birds are really repetitive. Coyotes have a very distinctive signature, and coyotes, they're all over the place. They make a lot of different vocals, and that's where tone and pitch come into play. It's just overall, there's a lot of different aspects that goes into reviewing the audio. And it's not just I'm dubbing something suspicious because of one thing. There's multiple things that go into why I would label something suspicious.
Gotcha. Let's say we've got people listening. I need to make sure I have a good sound recorder. What are your thoughts on what to get as a beginner?
I went with Tascam's DRO5s.
Okay.
They're relatively inexpensive. They record good sound. They're perfect. I still use them when I go camping. I have 6 because I like to put out multiple recorders at different distances and different directions. But I know some people like Zooms, but for affordability for your first recorder, I like Tascams. Okay. But I think I know Alex, he likes his Zoom. Mm-hmm. I don't think one is better than the other for the price range. around $100. I think a Tascam DRO5X is $110 or something. You don't want mono. Stereo is always better. And I usually, with the Tascams, I have them set to the 320K MP3.
Okay.
Just because WAV is actually going to collect more detail. When you record in WAV format, you'll actually get a better quality recording, but it takes up so much memory.
Yes.
The 32 gig chip that those recorders take will fill up in a matter of hours versus days. Like with a 32 gig chip set at MP3 320K, you can get 3 days, like I said, with an external battery. And with lithium batteries, I've gotten 2 days with just the lithium batteries in it. It says not to use lithium in them, but I've never had an issue with Tascams and lithium. But WAV is obviously going to give you a better quality recording format wise, but it takes up all your memory. You need something like the SM4s that I use now. They have 2 terabyte slots. I could put 2 terabytes cards in them because it records only in WAV, and memory and power would come into play. But if you're a beginner, just get a Tascam or a Zoom and set it to MP3.
Why is it important to record in stereo?
It gives you more context to the overall ambient sound. It sounds better. If you listen to the Sierra sounds, they sound that was in mono. It doesn't. Right. It sounds crappy, and that's part of the criticism to those sounds. And I mean, you can record it. A lot of people like using parabolic dishes. I hate them. It sounds like crap. And unless you know specifically where to point it, why? I want to catch 360. I want an Omni mic or I want stereo. I want to catch 360 degrees around my recorder. I want to catch all the sound around it. I don't want to just focus on one place. The other thing if you have stereo mics on it, if you remember, I always forget, but if you have stereo mics, when you're reviewing in Spectrogram on Audacity, it'll show you each mic. You're going to get a picture for each mic.
Okay.
Start getting some directional on it. If the sound's coming in more on your left mic, that's where the sound's coming from. So if I remember to, I point my mics north to south, and left mic says pointed north, and something's coming in stronger on the left mic, then I know it's coming from the north. And then I could go back to that area and look at the area and say, okay, that makes sense. There's a ridgeline right there. There's sounds coming off that ridgeline.
When you are, let's say, walking around on an expedition out in the woods, do you have the recorder clipped to your backpack, or are you probably not holding it in your hands, or what's the thought with that?
So back in 2015, I had a couple experiences in X1. That's the first place I started recording in. And I decided I was going to start carrying my recorder with me. Various times carrying it, it's picking up all my movement, my noise. So I took a band from one of my headlamps and I put it on my head, and I just put the recorder in the band behind my hat right there. If you watch Seth's film, see the recorder on my head. I use a different recorder now. It's a smaller recorder. It's actually a better recorder than the Tascam. But yeah, the minute I'm out of the rig, I call it the head recorder. If you look at my files, head recorder, and then it'll have for the date all the sound I captured on that date and stuff. But the minute I'm out of the rig, I give a timestamp and I'm rolling. I don't go in the woods without that recorder going. I've had too much stuff happen in person, and I thankfully virtually every experience. I haven't had a lot of experiences, but virtually every experience I've had, I got it recorded. It's not just a story.
I've heard from actually multiple people that have told me sometimes the knock will happen right when you come in the woods. So you got to be ready right off the bat. You won't have time to click it on. You better be ready to go.
I talk about it in my last YouTube video, but just recently, March 12th of this year, Shane and Rebecca and I were servicing audio in the Nest area. And we didn't hear any of it because we were talking. When you're talking and you're with other people and moving, there's a lot of stuff you don't hear. But the minute I step out of Shane's truck, there's a whoop catching several other whoops. And what we did hear at the time is you want me to tell the whole story?
Let's go for it, man. Yeah, totally.
some of the audio is on my YouTube channel too, if you want to check it out. But
I'll link it. Don't worry.
Anyways, we'd gone up there. It was about 9 a.m. We were BSing. I gave a timestamp, jump out of Shane's rig, and I have 3 different areas that I record in the nest area. And this is quote unquote nest area 3.
Okay.
It's where we park the rig is actually not far from where the recorder is at, but you have to go about a roundabout way to get to because of Huckleberry. And there's one trail that we used to get in. So we walked around up the trail. I'm messing with the recorder. And actually, me and Rebecca were arguing about something on and off. So I was irritated with her. She was really irritated with me. But she was checking a game camera. And she got a bobcat, so she was all excited, and she was showing Shane and this and that. And I was mad at the recorder for some reason because there's always a technical difficulty that ticks me off when I get out there. And I'm dinking around with that, and Shane goes, "Hey, I'm going to go back and set a game camera in such and such location." I'm like, "Okay, yes, whatever. We'll see you back at the truck." Well, he takes off, and me and Rebecca are going about what we're doing. And Rebecca had heard after he left, she'd heard some branches break, and she just assumed it was Shane. And I didn't hear any of it. Shane got done setting up his camera, and he went back to the truck, and where he was at his truck, we're probably 150, maybe 200 yards from where the truck is. He can't see us. The Huckleberry's 6 to 9 feet tall in that area, but he can hear our distant voices. He can hear me and Rebecca every so often jibber jabbering. And all of a sudden, he hears branches breaking and brush moving going towards me and Rebecca's location.
Oh, man.
And he calls me on his cell phone. I have my phone on airplane mode because my phone's a piece of crap, and it's constantly looking for a signal up there. So I just put it on airplane mode. Otherwise, my battery's dead.
Good idea.
And so he doesn't get a hold of me, and he's worried. And it's not bear behavior, but he's, what if there's a screwy bear going at him? And he hears this thing getting closer to me and Rebecca. So he starts heading back in the trail to meet with us. He actually drew his gun too. Me and Rebecca, we're on our way out by this time. And Rebecca had heard there was one big crash, evidently. And once again, I did not hear it. And I was ticked off about something. And she had heard it, and she thought it was Shane. We get back, and we meet halfway with Shane, and he looks distraught. And I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "You didn't hear that?" I go, "Hear what?" He goes, "There's something going towards you guys. There's something moving through the brush." And
oh, man.
I'm like, "I didn't hear anything." And Rebecca goes, "Oh, that wasn't you?" And Shane's like, "No, it wasn't me." So we hung out for a while, and we didn't see or hear anything. And I'm like, it's probably a bear or something. But it was going towards us, which that was what was really odd. And that was sticking in the back of our brains, because definitely it wasn't deer running towards us. Whatever was coming towards me and Rebecca. And I have my thoughts on why. But anyways, we went about our day, and I got back home, and I started reviewing the audio from my audio recorder. 30 seconds after I step out of Shane's rig, whoop, there's a whoop we didn't. And I ended up recording 3 more whoops. I sent one of them's really close. We call it a slide whistle whoop. It has a perfect signature. It's on my YouTube channel. They were close to us, and we didn't even know it. And actually, I sent the audio to Managa Haley. He actually found another whoop that I didn't even see. But yeah, so that's why I carry an audio recorder on my head all the time, because we didn't even know what was going on. We would have never known that there was actual vocalizations going on, as well as the branch breaking and the percussives.
In the last few minutes that we have, I'm curious, what to you is the most compelling piece of Bigfoot evidence? The
tracks, honestly.
Okay.
The tracks. The audio, I love audio. And a lot of the audio for me is, that's definitely our target subjects. But what's always impressed me is the tracks. And the Patterson Gimlin film. I can't just pick one, dude. But
I know. Well, that's true. It's tough to pick one.
Honestly, I was really influenced by Krantz's book, and the track information is really what sticks with me, because that was the first thing that besides him showing that film, he also talked about the dermal ridges and the flexing in the foot. He didn't talk about the mid-tarsal break because that was top secret back then. That came out a little bit later. But back then, he talked about each track from the Patterson Gimlin film. That's what really impressed me. I never realized this, but there was like tracks to the animal they filmed. And there's details in those tracks. It was a living foot that created those tracks. I actually have a copy of 2 of the tracks now. But just the fact that it wasn't a stamped foot, same foot every time, that's what intrigues me. A living foot is creating these tracks that people are finding. It's not a cookie cutter stamped foot that's being found all the time. There's living, flexible footprints being found. That speaks volumes to the existence of something.
So you're part of the Olympic Project, the research group looking for Bigfoot in Washington State and the Olympic Peninsula. What is a way that listeners can keep up to date best with what yourself and what the group is doing? And do you guys have anything cool going on right now?
The Nest area, I'm doing an audio project there. Cool. I'm on my way to recording every night for 2022. I can't remember how many nights. I got most of last year recorded, but I'm logging absolutely everything from dusk till dawn. Liam from the Squatcher Metrics, me and him last year, we were talking, and we should just do an analysis of all the sound made from dusk till dawn. So just record everything and taking down all the animal sounds, the known sounds and the unknown sounds. And we did that last year, and I ended up buying 2 high-dollar recorders, but well worth the money, I think, that are capable of recording. Like, I can record realistically about 55 nights with the batteries I'm using right now.
Wow.
And we usually, me, Rebecca, and Shane, we go in and service the audio about once a month, because honestly, it's hard. I have so much audio. Basically, I'm reviewing audio 24/7 when I'm not at work at my day job.
Totally.
Just to keep up with it. And then I fill out a spreadsheet, and then Wes does his statistical analysis, because that's what Wes does. And the numbers don't lie. When certain things happen, we're finding some patterns. And that's where our goal is, to get this whole year recorded to compare with last year. I'll continue to record in there. I don't know that I'll have it. I have 3 recorders going in there right now. I probably won't have all 3 recorders going next year, but I'll record in there as long as the area hasn't been logged and is open to us. We'll continue to record in there and just log all the sound. We want to catch unknowns, but I'm logging all the known animal sounds too. We're doing some game camera work too, and our policy has been to stay out of certain areas during certain periods of time when we suspect the original nests that were found were built. And then, like, right now is the time we start actually exploring. And because of the audio that I've had rolling, we've confirmed that there's a higher amount of activity in certain areas at certain months than there are in other months. And now we're in the process of starting to go explore those areas. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we can find some newer nests built. That would be the holy grail, or any kind of physical evidence we can find. That's our goal. It's a hard area, though. It's everybody's talked about it. Shane's talked about it. Dick's talked about it.
Yep.
But you're on your hands and knees sometimes crawling through it. Just, it's so thick. But that's why, honestly, that's why they're there. No human in their right mind is going to this area. And if you're trying to avoid humans, you're going to go where humans don't go.
You get that from watching Seth's documentary, that it is not easy to get to that place.
Yeah,
where you're going.
Where we took Seth, we've been going in and out of there long enough that we've actually created kind of a trail. So where we're exploring now is thicker than that.
Chris, in the very, very last minutes, share real quick the best way that people can keep up to date with with what you're doing?
Basically, I have a YouTube channel called Tootle River Valley Skookum, Chris Spencer.
There's going to be some good resources in the show notes for this one. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.